is Jascha Rohr. I'm a philosopher. I'm co-founder and co-director of the Institute for Participatory Design, and now of the CoCreation Foundation. And together with Sonia, we have done participatory governance and design projects for the last 16 years on local up to national level. And the CoCreation Foundation is our attempt to transfer our knowledge and experience and our methodologies and our approaches onto the global level, where we feel there's a huge necessity for different approaches and methodologies to do governance. Of course, it's a completely different realms with different rules and different ways to do politics, but we think there's also a lot to learn from local and national participatory and co-creative governance projects. And that's why we started the CoCreation Foundation. And I'm very happy to just say that we just last week got official approval by the administrations in Germany. So we are now a registered foundation. That was a long approach. You all know these founding procedures and processes, and we are really glad, and in a month we will all party in Berlin together. So yeah, great to be here in this group of experts of all fields. It's great to share our thinking and our approach. The CoCreation Foundation, we don't claim we have an answer. We really start off with raising questions, and we want to explore, develop, prototype, and test new approaches to global governance based on what we understand as co-creation, because we feel that the world's problems nowadays need these approaches, need more creative, co-creative approaches to governance and to solution finding. You all know it, after Second World War, sort of the international governance system as we have it now was built and designed after Second World War for certain purposes, for example, to establish peace in the world after 2 world wars. And now we have different challenges like global climate change, plastic in the oceans, pandemic just recently, how we want to trade and live on this planet together if we get up to 10 to 12 billion people on this planet. And we want to sort of provide and start from our side thinking in that direction of what can we do. And as I said, all this work is based on our experience in governance design and participatory projects for 16 years with our Institute for Participatory Design. And we are now conducting first project, that's the Global Resonance Project, where we reach out to other activists, professionals as you are, and try to see what you know and how we can share our knowledge and where to proceed from there. The whole approach is part of a large, many years design process, and this is the first step we're in at the moment. So we're basically promoting 3 things, which is we want global governance to be more co-creative. That means more inclusive and participatory, and more design and solution oriented. We're looking for new forms of global governance, alternatives to the way global governance is working at the moment. And we're doing that by an approach we call governance design, because our understanding from conducting participatory projects on local and national levels in the last 16 years in our institute, we found that all of these projects and processes need a governance design in advance in order for them to work. So we have to think about the procedures, spaces, technology, methodologies, and the interfaces to classical government structures in order to do proper participatory processes. So today's workshop is split into 3 parts. I'll give you a short introduction to some key concepts, 3 of them. It's only 3 of many we are working on at the moment and developing and exploring and discussing with others. I will just give you 3 of these models and concepts, and we want to do a very short brainstorm session and breakouts as a miniature co-creative process on governance design, just to give you an idea what this could be about, governance design. And of course, we want to talk about global climate change. That's sort of our case we will be working on. And we hope to get feedback from you afterwards in this session or after the session. And of course, some new ideas, tangible ideas to how a different global governance process on climate change could look like, but also, of course, feedback on our models. And Alistair, I would like to ask you to share the mural with us. And I hope everyone could log in already. We're not yet working on it, but the models I want to present to you are on this mural as well. So Alistair will screen share it with you. And if we go into the breakout sessions, he will also, you will be able to work on it. And I would ask you, Alistair, to zoom in on the first point, models of politics. That is the first kind of model or concept I want to share with you. And it was part of a research project for another foundation here in Germany on co-creating trade policy. And it's a very simple stripped down model of modes of politics as we see it at the CoCreation Foundation. We did this study with the Institute for Participatory Design. And while doing our analysis, we found that there are basically 4 modes, or we can think about 4 modes of politics. Like how do we want to achieve our goals in politics? And the first mode is forcing, by war or by threatening or by blackmailing, for example. The second mode is negotiating, and that is the most prevalent mode of politics, especially on the global level, but also on national or local level, as people sit together and talk, they bargain. Basically, it's bargaining. And while the first mode is more sort of the metaphor of the battlefield, the second is the metaphor of the marketplace. I have something you need, you have something I need, and we bargain for the price, and then we get to it. The third, and in our understanding, more advanced mode of politics is deliberating or discussions and debating, and the metaphor is the parliament, of course. And here it's about arguments, about reasoning, about opinion making, and finally coming hopefully to a joint decision. That at least is the theory of deliberation and the parliament. Of course, often in the back, there's a lot of negotiating as well, and maybe even forcing. So the modes, the predecessing modes are still part of the game. And where we want to go is to co-creating as a mode of politics. And we understand that co-creation as a mode of politics, the metaphor would be the workshop, is more the approach of methodologies like design thinking, participatory design, all kinds of methodology from innovation, design, planning, and so on, so that people come together and innovate and find solutions for the problems they have, rather than discussing about their opinions or trying to get their own agenda through. So that's the first mode of politics, to just give you an understanding where we are with co-creating and why we think this, especially when we talk about climate change, for example, is a better mode to do politics at the moment than deliberating, which is still good, but it's even better than negotiating, and obviously better than forcing. So the second small model I just want to provide you with, and this is a work in process model, so I'm happy to receive lots of feedback on that, is you're all aware, obviously, that there's a difference between government and governance, and in our understanding, government is a sort of institutionalized rule of a nation, especially, or local entity, and you could argue that things like the United Nations are the attempt to have something resembling a global government, but of course there is no global government. And governance is, in our understanding, much more. It is all the powers and forces who influence and who help us finding opinions, making decisions, and innovating in a society. And you know Montesquieu's separation of powers, the legislative, the judicial, and the executive powers of a state. And we think that talking about governance, and we work with this model on national level, for example, as well, there are other forces or other powers. There's a sort of expanded separation of powers. And in a governance system, that could be, for example, and this is, we're still working on it, as I said, could be the creative power, the productive power, the discursive power, and the educative power. And just to give you sort of a short understanding, like the creative power, that is everything which innovates and develops new concepts and ideas and solutions for social problems. The productive power is the power who implements technological, social, political, environmental solutions and prototypes and test products and concepts, and scales, for example, good solutions. The discursive power would be a power who fosters discourse, opinion making, decision making in a society, and creates a global or here local or national public sphere, for example, in media, art, but as well in politics. And the educative power is the power who's about knowledge and facts, and producing knowledge, but also distributing knowledge and educating people and raising awareness and concern, for example. So, and the third model, and it's the last model for this small session here, are the patterns of co-creative governance design. So we made, as I said, we made the experience that if we want to co-creatively develop solutions for any given theme, the first thing we have to do is to create the proper structures and procedures to do that. And this could be spaces, that could be procedures. We probably need to have the proper technology. We'll have to think about methodologies, projects, institutional interfaces, and so on. These are all aspects or patterns we need to use to design governance structures in which we can then co-creatively work and find the solutions, for example, with participants in a participatory process. And just if you might move a little bit higher so that we can see point 2 and 3 together. So the idea for this workshop now is that there is a combination that every power of governance needs these patterns of governance design. So in order to develop a new, for example, creative power of governance in a society, we need to design procedures, spaces, and technology, just to take out the highlighted orange ones, in this realm in new ways so that it can work towards the problems and solutions we want to find for those problems. And now just as a fourth point, but I won't go into that very much. I just want to show you, we'll publish in 1 or 2 months a study on the process of governance of the climate conferences, the COP climate conferences. And these, for example, are procedural charts, how the design of these conferences works. It's in German, I'm sorry about that. We haven't yet fully translated everything. I'm not going into it. It was a lot of work, but we wanted to understand how the governance design of the COP climate conferences works. Like, what is happening there? Of course, most of it is negotiation. It's in the mode of negotiation. And that is probably one of the reasons why it does take a long time and why we don't see the results we need to see in a subject like climate change. But as I said, I don't want to get into it. I want to just give you this great complex looking graph as a teaser, so that you might be interested in reading the study if it gets out. And this is just an analysis. And what we then want to try to do is to do a design, to make a design proposal, how to enhance, either enhance the process of the COP climate conferences, or to make a proposal how to do it differently, or to make a proposal or a design proposal how to have a parallel, more civil society based and co-creatively based process. We haven't decided yet. We're still sort of trying to analyze that, but this is where we're going. So, and now I'll just have a short look at the watch. Yeah, that's okay. We want to do a small brainstorming and co-creation exercise. Of course, this is a huge subject. It's highly complex, and we're trying to do something of relevance in 15 to 16 minutes now with you. We just give it a try, okay? So what we want to do is we want to split you up in 4 breakout rooms, and each breakout session will work on one of these orange powers. So the creative power, the productive power, the discursive power, or the educative power, with regards to global climate change. And we would ask you to brainstorm on these light blue post-its in your group, and we'll do that in parallel, on the questions we have put there, where Alistair shows with the pointer. So we would like you to ask, what spaces, what procedures, and what technologies do you think do we need? And then each group of you has a set of 3 questions. For the educative, what spaces, procedures, and technology do we need to raise global awareness and concern for climate change, to distribute necessary knowledge and facts about climate change, and to make knowledge and facts about climate change easily accessible and available for everyone on local and global scale? Give us a brainstorming on what spaces, procedures, and technologies you think an ideal global governance process on climate change should have. For the discursive power, what spaces, procedures, and technology do we need to foster a global discourse on climate change, to enable a global opinion forming and decision making regarding to climate change, and to create a global public sphere in media, art, and politics to transparently deal with the topic of climate change? For the group who has the creative power, what spaces, procedures, and technology do we need to innovate local and global solutions for climate change, to enable new ideas, solutions, and approaches to climate change emerge, to design necessary transformative concepts to climate change on all levels from local to global? And the last group of the productive force will have the questions: what spaces, procedures, and technologies do we need to implement technological, social, political, and environmental solutions fast and efficient? To prototype and test products and concepts to tackle climate change and reduce emissions, and to scale good solutions in quantity, adapt them locally, and improve them iteratively. So that is our basic idea of what we think needs to be done to do governance design on a global level, just as a very, very brief sort of fly-in. And we would now like to start getting into breakouts for Alistair 15 minutes. And you'll see we'll label the breakout session on which kind of power you work on. And please, in the group, discuss, just, it's a brainstorm, really snappy, like don't get into detail, just what comes up as associations, maybe best practice you already know, and put them on the mural. And then we'll come back in 15 minutes and have an open discussion and look at the results we get from the brainstorming. And you can raise questions and we can get into depth.
And I will visit all breakout sessions to be able to assist technically in case there are problems. But even if not everybody has a mural open, we thought even one mural per group would be enough to really, you know, use the whiteboard. And I'm now assigning the breakouts.
I would propose that sort of maybe each breakout session just gives a sort of a 2 minutes max sort of wrap up of their discussion, and maybe the 2 or 3 most important findings or the most enlightening revelatory findings of your group, without please reading all of the post-its. We can do that afterwards. You can all get a PDF of this chart anyways. So we start with the creative power in terms of global governance and climate change. Who was in the group and who wants to give us a very quick wrap up?
James, can you do it? I think you would be fantastic.
So Hugo, Jenny and I were looking at we almost got caught in really trying to think what creative meant, and whether it meant like the creative sector or just creating things. We steered away from that purely because it was 15 minutes and probably it's an essay question in itself. But we kind of fell into looking at who's telling stories that place an agency on people to play a role in this, rather than what tends to happen in reports on it or climate change is that humans can't do anything. The average Joe public can't do anything anymore. It's all going wrong and it's almost too late, which is quite demoralizing and pessimistic. You know, some people might be convinced it's true, but it's not going to change people. So how do you like tell stories or do art or theatre that kind of places an agency in and hope in people actually doing something? And then Hugo, I think you were kind of questioning whether there's a need, whether creating new stuff or the creative sphere was what was needed, because you felt like a lot of solutions were already out there, we just weren't making use of them. I hope that's doing your point justice, Hugo.
You just add, I think there was a bit of confusion on whether it was creating solutions, technology or so forth, or whether it's referring to the creative sector, which to me felt like it was more like the discursive container, actually. And my point was that I don't think we need a lot of more technology to solve this crisis. That's not the issue. So I was sort of saying, do we need creation at all? And if we don't need creation, then we don't need co-creation.
Okay. So the concept of these division of power, the expanded division of power, is that the creative power is neither nor, but is more like the executive in a government makes decision. So the creative power in a society is that power which creates new innovative solutions to a problem.
Let's move. I'm the time.
Yeah, let's move. Yeah.
Let's move to the productive. Whoever was in the group and feels like taking the lead and presenting what you found out and the you had.
I mean, Sophia, you have added so many good ideas. Do you want to?
Sure. I guess we came into a lot of discussions about how we could see the productive element of power as an engine for solutions, and how what needed to be in place for that element to work better. I talked about how there might need to be a bit of a cultural shift in some existing institutions to allow for early failure, real life testing, and to sort of be more in sync with the institutions and the change makers, and a lot of collaboration and openness to have the productive element to really be an efficient player.
Yeah. If I might add, I had a small epiphany about the idea of linking a productive cycle of development or production process with iterations in the legislation. So, for example, that if you develop a new mobility system without CO2, that the legislation is part of the iterative change of developing this system. So that you don't get one legislation, but after first cycle, not only the product or the system or the concept you want to install gets renewed, but also there's a review of the legislation. That was quite interesting for me. So yeah, thank you.
Perfect. I'm just mentioning timekeeping wise, we will be 10 minutes only over the time. So if everybody's still interested, we just proceed. And again, after that, we're happy to stay in the discussion with you. The discursive realm.
I'm happy to speak with that, and please, all the other participants, please correct what I'm saying. But we began with a very creative misunderstanding, because I thought discursive might mean media structures and forms of communication. But one of the group very interestingly said, no, perhaps discursive means how we talk together. And maybe even from a cognitive science perspective, how do we feel with each other so that we can talk together properly? So there was an interesting discussion there about discursively, maybe you would want an idea of a support group for climate change rather than a huge media event. It was something that was supportive and enabled rich discussion to happen. And then the question went on to, well, how does that work online? Could that work online? I mean, I guess we're kind of doing that here now, right? But someone emphasized that there are perhaps skills and practices that we'd be very explicit about online that would help this kind of discourse to happen, sort of rich, thick, mature discourse to happen. And then other people shared information about experiences that they had in terms of trust in information. How do we rebuild trust in information? What are the processes whereby that happens? Maybe actively identifying misinformation in civil society groups is one way to do it. So proactively go out and identify misinformation or disinformation. Maybe we lack the kind of communities in which we could exist but also productively disagree. Maybe they are not really available to us. So how do we construct sort of micro communities where we clash together? particularly across the value divide, you know, the cosmopolitan nativist value divide, for example. And then finally, people talked about importance of feeling in a safe space to be able to say things and to be very, very attentive to the different kinds of personality that come into a space, so that people can be heard who are not often heard, different styles of contribution are recognized and acknowledged. So I thought it was really interesting that we went from media to actually deep, deep structures of how we communicate, and how a consideration of those deep structures will develop the kind of media structures and interaction structures that might make that happen and work. Did I get that right, everyone? Everyone else want to come in on that from my group?
Thanks, Pat.
Wonderful,
okay, cool.
Great, thank you.
Finally, the educative group. Who wants to speak?
You even clustered your answers. Wow.
Who wants to speak up for the group?
I can speak, yes. We talked about, yeah, I mean, the places where maybe schools should be brought back closer to nature, parks and avenues, places where you can see also climate change has affected those places. So we can bring a more sensory approach back, so that, yeah, people develop place and sense experiences of climate change and climate education. Then we talked a lot about also how to make climate science and information more emotionally engaging, to make it more relevant, more personal to someone's circumstance. So there's a motivation and draw to see the effect and to act on it. That there was a difference between also having an emotional connection and not having one. And that education needs to shift away from, I mean, educating productive workers or educating towards a future which will likely not take place. How can we prepare for a transition? How can we bring in things, for example, learning from nature, by mimicry? And this is the one. Yeah, reskilling learners and apprenticeships. How can we basically make it more relevant to the future we actually see coming?
I don't know who has the background noise with the children. It's cute.
It's not me.
Let's move into the plenary, and I would like to give Jascha the voice, and yeah, maybe we're able to still all stay together for, let's say, 10-15 minutes. That would be great.
Yeah, thank you. That is very rich, and I'm looking forward to getting deep into it and reading every note and be inspired by what you just did. I'm happy that it worked out that way. We're not going in a sort of session because we're over time now on the mural anymore. But what I would just to say in the end is, of course, this is just sort of the first brainstorming. I think it's here. I'm gonna make it. This was just a first brainstorming, and if we would really and honestly and earnestly and seriously try to do a design on a global governance process on climate change, it would obviously be necessary to now sort of consolidate this and interlink all these power with each other, also the government powers, to create both new structures, spaces, and procedures. I think I have some noise here in the background. I just can't let it. Sorry. No. Sorry, that was annoying. So part of a design process like that would be to bring these all together and to make as well procedural proposals, as well create spaces and places and structures on how to organize a whole global participatory process on climate change. And this obviously is a huge endeavor, and our small foundation will not be able to do that alone, and we don't even plan or intend to, but we want to sort of provide the knowledge and experience we have into the discourse. So that is just sort of hopefully gives you a general idea of what our foundation is about and what we understand as global governance design, and at this exemplary session. And we're over time now, and as I said, I'll be here. So if there's more interest for Q&A or just an open discussion, I'm happy to. For those who have to attend different other sessions or just need a break and dinner or whatever, was great to have you here. Thank you very much.